Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the Etiquette Guy. I'm Jay Remer, your host, and with me today is Mary Rogers.
Good.
Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you very much, Jay. How are you?
I'm just great, thanks. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. We're going to talk about verbal communications, because there seems to be a lot of questions coming in lately about when it's appropriate to have face-to-face conversations versus conversations on the telephone, versus Skyping, and all of these different things. And so people have asked a lot of different questions, and so that's what you and I are going to talk about today.
That's what we have today. So let's get started if you'd like. Do you want to start the face-to-face?
Okay.
Okay, how about face-to-face? And what do you think about relationship breakups? Is it okay to break up with somebody via texting, or is face-to-face preferred?
Oh, well, let's just start right out of the canon. Breaking up with someone is something that really should be done face-to-face, with one exception, and that is if there's danger involved. I think that if you think that there could be, if you could be in danger, then I think that you simply indicate that you're not going back to this relationship, and you can end it that way. But if it's a more less dramatic kind of a breakup,
amicable, maybe,
then face-to-face is really important, because it accords a certain level of respect to the other person and to yourself, because if you're going to invest in having a relationship, you don't want to just have it cursory, well, I guess we're done with that, like so many toys. It's not I think if it's a serious relationship, you owe it to yourself, the other person, and the relationship to terminate it in a face-to-face way. You'll feel better about yourself, and you can offer explanation, and you can have more closure. You can see what the other person is saying with their eyes, and and with their facial expressions. There's a lot of advantages to face-to-face communication that you don't get on the telephone. So I think that when possible, it's always best to have face-to-face communications. Really, whether you're breaking up with somebody or whether you're having just a civil discussion, there's so much added value to seeing someone face-to-face. Now, it's obviously not possible, all the time. We have great distances between us sometimes, or you need a quick answer, so it isn't always possible. But whenever it's possible, face-to-face is the most effective form of communication. So, for example, if you were in a work situation and you were going to have to fire someone, or you were going to hire someone, or interview someone, or whatever it might be, face-to-face is really the best way to handle it.
What about dealing with the emotional side? Like when there's a breakup, there's usually the person that is doing the dumping and the person being dumped. How would you handle that situation?
The dumper versus the dumpee?
Dumper.
Well, I've been in both situations myself, as probably most of us have over the course of our lives. And there is usually an emotional component. Women tend to be more expressive with their emotions than men do. But I still think that whether it's going to be an emotionally charged conversation or not, as long as there's not a safety issue at play, then I think you deal with the emotions. It's part of life, and it's a really important part of life. And if you only cherry pick out when you're going to have cheery conversations face-to-face, and you leave out the difficult ones, you're not experiencing life. You're not in a position to be able to share these skills which require practice. You're not in a position to share them with your children, and you don't set a good example, and you don't feel good about yourself. So I think that it is, I think that even in an emotional situation, it's good because then you can actually have a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to go on for a long period of time, but one's facial expressions say a lot, and you can have a much shorter conversation in many ways if you're face to face. And then you can be sensitive to how the other person is feeling, because I think anytime you want relationships or any kind of discussion to end on a win-win situation, it wants to be win-win. Otherwise it's lose-lose. There isn't any win-lose. It's either everybody loses or everybody wins. And I think that it's really important to consider the other person's feelings. That's what etiquette really is all about, is considering the other person before yourself. So if you're having a serious discussion, once you get the ball rolling, you become much more comfortable and thankful that you decided to go that route. Yeah.
Face to face.
Face to face
is always best.
I think so.
All right. Now, what about using the telephone in terms of forms of verbal communications? For example, can a telephone call be a good substitute for a face-to-face meeting?
Well, I think telephones are wonderful, and ever since the 20s, or I guess it was just the early 20s when they got installed at Highclere Castle on Downton Abbey, where it was what was it called? It was some kind of a torture device. They've been enormously useful, and I think they're beginning to lose their usefulness today because everybody's relying on emails and curtains that they can hide behind. The telephone is enough of a curtain to hide behind. And I find that telephones have certain advantages. Obviously, if you want to get in touch with someone and you want to hear their voice, and they're a distance away, you can't. The telephone is the only solution, really, other than Skyping, but which is similar. So I think the advantage to telephones is that you can reach many more people, and the voice inflection can be detected, whereas in the written word it cannot be. It's only the way it's phrased, and some people are more skilled at phrasing the written word than other people, but when it comes to conveying a message verbally, we all know what we have on our mind, and we all have our techniques or our delivery styles. So I think that if you feel comfortable talking on the phone, I think it's a good idea. I also think that it's a really good idea to check in with your family from time to time, especially older members of your family. I know in some cases, well, when I grew up, long-distance telephone calls were cherished because they were expensive. And so Sunday nights was always the cheap time to call. So we would always call everybody all over the country on Sunday nights, and that was it. There was never even thought about talking to them otherwise, but you knew you were on the hot seat for Sunday night, so you better have something good to say. And it does bring families closer together. Now, in this day and age where you can do Skype and all that, that comes in handy, but there are a lot of people that don't have all those contraptions. And I think that it's really, the telephone can be quick. If you don't want to talk on the phone, you don't have to answer it. And if you so you can leave a message. So you may even know when the person is not going to be around, and you can call and leave a message. But if you are going to leave a message, make sure that you leave it clear message. The person at the other end of the phone is not a stenographer. They are not taking shorthand, so speak clearly. Tell the number slowly, your name succinctly. You want to leave a good short message. I have one friend that phones me from time to time, and they just use up the entire message tape I mean, it's just like, okay, well, here we go.
I'm sure
And-
we've had all of those.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, another thing, if I could add to that, another thing to do is to say when you called, like what the day was, and maybe a given time. Somebody, if I get a message, I might be gone for 2 or 3 days, and I'm wondering, well, did I see this person already, or when did they call me, or has it been? Was it today? Was it yesterday? Was it last week? So just as another addition,
I think leaving the time and the date is really important. I think also, though, that when you're leaving an outgoing message, where if you are going away, I don't think it's a good idea to necessarily state the dates that you're going to be gone for, because it just opens up a can of worms.
Oh, sure.
It also is very dangerous if you have children at home. If you say, we're away, or if you have, for instance, if you have a house sitter or a babysitter, if you're going away for 2 weeks and the kids are at home with a babysitter, and somebody calls for Mrs. Rogers, and the person in charge says, well, Mrs. Rogers is out of town for 2 weeks. That's a really bad thing, because that sets up all kinds of scenarios that could end badly. And I remember once calling a friend of mine, and that exact thing happened. And I said to her, you really shouldn't tell me that these people are away for 2 weeks, because you don't know me. And when I spoke with the person who I had been trying to reach, I said, you just might want to keep in mind that this is, he said, I'd never even thought about that. So this kind of personal information is not necessary to share with a phone message. Now, for me, living alone in a house that's secure, I don't care whether people know that I'm coming or not, here or there, because there are always people in and out of the house anyway. But in most cases, it's a good idea not to share that sort of information. It's just not necessary, and it's potentially dangerous.
From an etiquette point of view, when you do get a call, how should you answer the call? How should you answer your telephone?
Well, that is a matter of personal choice. But I do think that if you're going to take the call, you should be in a good mood. Rule of thumb that I use is, if I'm going to take a call, if I'm not lying in bed, I get up. I stand up to take the call. For some reason, I have this, how you have a routine before you're about to hit a golf ball or swing a baseball bat. There's a sort of a warm-up routine. Well, for some reason, I have a throat clearing thing, which is so irritating. But the phone can ring, and the first thing I have to do is clear my throat. Doesn't matter where I am or what I've been doing. It's the damnedest thing. Anyway, make sure you do that before you actually pick the receiver up, and smile. People can detect a smile. Now, in my day and age, we always said hello. That was how we answered the phone. Now, today, that's kind of considered a bit too abrupt. So I know, for instance, when Patrick answers the phone, it's always, hello, this is Patrick speaking. So I think that's a very nice way to answer the phone. I sometimes, and I know my father would answer the phone, John Remer, and I thought that was very businesslike.
Yes.
And so everybody has their own style. I tend to, because I grew up saying hello, I tend to say hello. But I do think that it's important that you identify yourself if necessary. Like if you get somebody who you don't know who this is, and they'll say, who am I speaking to? Well, I'll say, this is Jay, who am I speaking to? Because I want to know who I'm speaking to. So getting that kind of thing, off the bat. But I think the thing is if you stand up and smile when you answer the phone, people know that. They just know that you're in a receptive mood to take a call. And oftentimes, if you're dashing out the door and you don't have time to talk on the phone, don't pick the phone up. If the phone rings at dinner, don't pick the phone up. You're not inviting those people to the dinner table. And it's rude to be interrupting the rest of your guests or your family to take a telephone call. So I think that unless it's an emergency, and you generally know your telephone call patterns. And also today we have caller ID. So you know if it's a call coming in from an 800 number, just ignore it. Or what I do, actually, to be honest with you, I pick the receiver up and put it back down again. I don't even talk.
Okay.
I just pick it up and hang it down, because you know, I don't take those kinds of calls.
They tend to call at the most inconvenient times too.
Well, they
Mealtime,
do.
While
I mean,
you're getting the meal ready.
They do, but
They-
I have family
you're
members
home.
who have a knack for that too.
Oh, sure.
And it's not, they're not trying to, you know, interrupt you or whatever you're doing. They're in a different time zone,
schedule.
and or you know, they could be in California or England or who knows where they're going to
Sure.
be. So I think the deal with the telephone is that if you're going to call someone and you want to actually be sure that they're there to speak to, you really call and set up a telephone appointment almost. Like if it's a business thing, I oftentimes will call and say, I need to have about a half an hour of your time. If it's not convenient right now, which I can appreciate, would it be possible for us to schedule a time? Even if I was to call you to talk about a television show, I would not expect, if I called you, that you would necessarily be free, even if you had picked up the telephone, because you may just be walking through the living room, but you may be on your way to pot a plant, and it may not be convenient for you to talk for half an hour. Or you may not want to talk to me for half an hour at this particular moment because something else is going on in your life that I'm unaware of. So I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that just because we pick up the phone to call someone, and just because they pick up the phone to answer it, doesn't mean that we have carte blanche on their time. We still need to be respectful of that and be sure and ask them whether or not they have time to chat. And then, if not, then you just state the reason for your call, and you sort out a mutually agreeable time to call back. And then you both know that this is going to happen, and you can both be on, so to speak, for that conversation. I do that constantly. I do it with Skyping. I do it with the telephone, and I definitely do it for face-to-face. I would no more walk into an office expecting to talk to somebody than fly to the moon. It could not be less. It's so intrusive, so it's not respectful at all. Just to barge into somebody's office and expect them to take that you're not doing anything else. It's absurd.
I really like the comment about the telephone appointment. I like that idea.
It works
And
for me. I find that it works for me. I'm very organized, and I don't like wasting time. So I don't want my time wasted, nor do I want to waste anyone else's time. So if I say it's going to be a half hour, it's going to be a half hour or less. I have someone who I Skype with in England every week, generally speaking, and it's understood that our conversations will be an hour, and they're usually within 30 seconds of the hour almost every time, because that's just the way we work. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Now, you alluded already to Skyping, and Skyping is becoming more and more and more popular. How do you think, with regards to like business meetings, do you think it's appropriate business meetings to be Skyping, having a Skyped?
Well, you know, I have limited experience with Skype. I also have limited experience with these GoToMeeting.com, which is another, that's not a, you can't see people, I don't think. Well, maybe you can, but I have also done these long distance where you beam into other law offices or whatever. I think for certain applications, they're okay, but only okay. I mean, it's the first person I saw do this was Oprah, and she started Skyping her guests in instead of flying them in on American Airlines, which I thought, well, gosh, the girl's smart. She's saving a few bucks here.
I guess
and
maybe.
Ever since, you know, she started doing this, I see Oprah kind of as a little bit of a barometer on how things are going to move in many cases. I thought, well, you know, there might be some validity to this. But my experience with these kinds of things is that people who are not in the room find other things to distract them. Like they'll be fiddling on their laptop, or they'll be talking to somebody else. So you lose that direct connection. Even though they're there visually,
Yes.
if you're looking in a television monitor at them, I found that it can be it's a disconnect almost. And what it does is, if they're not paying attention to me, like if there's somebody around the table not paying attention to me, I just simply look at them. And then the room falls silent until their eyes meet mine. And then it's like, oops, busted. But because if I'm trying to make a point, I want everybody's attention. I didn't invite people there to go and to do knitting. I have them there to pay attention to what I have to say. And that would be true of anyone else at the table. If it was their turn to speak, I would expect everybody to be paying attention to them. That's the way meetings work. And I find it very irritating when meetings are interrupted by people kibitzing. Oh, did you? And it happens all the time. And I have a short fuse for that. So my flexibility on the attention that one pays is a fairly short fuse. I'm not flexible when it comes to that, and I find Skyping pushes my buttons a bit because people aren't always paying attention. If I were on Skype, I mean, I normally do it one-to-one, and I normally want to see who the other person is, and because it's just like you and I having a conversation here. We can see each other's facial expressions, we can hear the inflections in the voice, and so I think that there's an advantage to that over the telephone. The only disadvantage with Skype is that it takes up quite a lot of bandwidth, and it breaks up quite a bit. Even if you don't move and the other person doesn't move, stuff happens between here and there, and and it can be the result of an email coming in, or there's all kinds of technical stuff that can make this occur. And so if you're going to Skype, I always suggest to people to close out of programs which are which take up a lot of bandwidth. TweetDeck, for instance, takes up quite a lot of space for some reason, and so I just shut that down. And there's all kinds of different things. So I think for business meetings, Skyping has limited appeal. I think for family get-togethers, if you've got Granny in California and another Granny in Paris, and brothers and sisters dotted around, you can actually have some fun with it. And I think that it was intended,
more for the entertainment purpose and for casual communication rather than the business.
I think that, if you're communicating with India, for instance, and that's not unusual today because India has a very fast growing economy, as does China. And I find if I am communicating with either of those countries, which is tricky just from the timing point of view, you certainly are the only choice that you have, if you actually want to see what this person looks like and get how they're understanding what you're saying, is to do it with Skype. And so it comes in very handy that way. Now you can do just a verbal with Skype. You don't have to have the
camera on.
The camera doesn't have to be on. But anyway, so I think that all three of those of those forms of verbal communication have, there's some that are more appropriate at times, than others. And I think common sense will dictate a lot of, when to use one versus the other. And also just plain logistics. So to summarize how things, I think that face-to-face is always best, especially if it's a serious matter. So whether it's a matter of a personal matter, whether it is a serious business matter, like a hiring or firing, or some kind of something that is very it involves a closeness that you cannot get on the telephone. You really want to look into the person's eyes and see what's going on. There's no better substitute than face-to-face. And I have a problem in that I get very serious a lot of times, and I forget to smile. And people will notice on the television that and I notice it. I'm like, oh, I'm so serious. I've got to smile. And so, at any rate, I have to. So, if you're going to do face-to-face, remember that your facial expression has a lot of what's going on. And then the telephone, I think, it needs to be used more than it is. A lot of people just, they stay away from the phone now because they use emails and things, which we'll talk about another show. But I think that the telephone is underutilized, and that doesn't mean that you have to have hour-long conversations. It just means that pick up the phone if you really want to get something done, because emails can be endless. And then I think Skyping is more of I see it more as a recreational kind of a thing. I think that it will become more of a business thing, especially as we communicate with people around the globe on a more regular basis, which is happening, really.
Sure.
But that's just the way, that's my interpretation of it now. So I think for verbal, remember your facial expression, because it's what you can't see on the telephone. And your tone is very important. Your tone and your eye contact, those are very important. For the telephone, remember it's going to be about your voice, because your vocal inflection has really has a big impact there. They aren't going to see your face, so you have to be expressive through your voice. And the pause in your conversation can be just as expressive as the talking. And be sure to listen with the intent of hearing and understanding the other person, not just listening with the intention of responding. There's a difference there, and one needs to learn to discern those two things skillfully. And then with Skype, it's more of a recreational, let's have some fun, more informal. So those are the three verbal ones, and that brings us to the end of this episode of the Etiquette Guy.
Oh, well, didn't that pass by quickly?
Thank you very much for co-hosting with me today, Mary. It's always fun. I love talking with you.
Yes.
And thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for another episode of the Etiquette Guy. Bye for now.